Hi, everyone. Welcome to this month's edition of the Talking Tim webinar series. Thanks for being here. My name is Kyla Elzinga, and I'll help facilitate today's webinar. This webinar is sponsored by the Federal Highway Administration and hosted by NOCO, the National Operations Center of Excellence. As a quick reminder, NOCO offers a variety of resources to support the transportation systems management and operations community. You can go to NOCO's website at transportationops.org to browse through links for TISMA resources and news. Previous webinar recordings and case studies can be accessed from the NOCO resource pages. Few logistics for today's webinar before we get started. All attendees are in listen-only mode by default, but we encourage you to stay engaged by using the chat box to identify your name, title, and the agency you represent. We will have a question and answer session at the end of all presentations, so if you have any questions, we encourage you to use the Q&A area as they come to mind at any time. And we are recording the webinar, and the recording will be available on NOCO's website within a few days. Thank you again for attending today, and I'll hand it off to today's moderator, Vishali Shah, to get us started. Thank you.
Thank you, Kyla. Welcome, everyone. Please do add your name and where you hail from in the chat. Next slide. This webinar, as Kyla mentioned, is hosted by the Federal Highway Administration, and this is the standard disclaimer that anything that is presented are the views of the presenters and not necessarily that of the U.S. Department of Transportation, and any products or manufacturers that are named for the purpose of the discussion and not an endorsement. Next slide. Our regular host, Jim Ostrich, is unable to take part today, so I am happy to fill in. Next slide. And I am with the ICF team, AEM Corporation, supporting the Federal Highway Administration's Traffic Incident Management Program. Next slide. So what are we going to talk about today? Two really wonderful presenters and presentations. The first will be on Pennsylvania Safety Transportation and Research Track, and the second will be on Georgia Department of Transportation and their use of the TIM self-assessment, as well as the TIM self-assessment outcomes nationally from the 2025 cycle. And then we will start with Q&A after both presenters are completed. And we encourage you to ask questions of our presenters using the Q&A button at the bottom center of your screen. A few FHWA updates coming up next. We are now at almost 850,000 TIM responders trained as of February 9th, 2026. A wonderful number, but as Jim discussed last Talking Tim, there is a goal, very strongly supported goal, to get to 1 million responders. That means 150,000 responders to be trained this year. And if you break it out over the next 10 months, that's 15,000 trained a month. So that's about, about 75 to 100 trained a week by state. So let's see if we can make that happen. Next slide, please. If we break out that 850,000 over the last 2 weeks, Indiana once again leads the pack with almost 1,400 responders TIM trained in the last 2 weeks. We hope to not see any states below that 10 to 15 mark. And so if there is a need to get more training or support, please do reach out to Jim Ostrich and the team. Next slide. This is training data by state, and you can see that there are 13 states that have 75+% of their responders TIM trained. And so we, applaud the states there and encourage those that are lagging to reach out and figure out how we can get every responder from a place of greater safety through TIM training. Next slide. And for resources on training, the FHWA TIM website link is here. Kyla will put it in the chat, and it includes both program objectives and interactive maps so you can see where your state is and how training has advanced by responder category. And there are going to be upcoming Train the Trainers, and you can sign up here for notification when the next Train the Trainer sessions come up. Next slide, please. Two upcoming webinars of note. Our next Talking Tim webinar will be on Wednesday, March 25th, and we are very pleased to have Minnesota share their TIM program, which has recently changed in its organizational structure. And so we'll learn a lot about that and how this change will help strengthen the TIM program there. And then there is a webinar on April 2nd from the Federal Highway Administration's planned special events spotlight webinar series. And that webinar will include a debrief from the 2026 Super Bowl with the San Francisco Metropolitan Transportation Commission. So, Kyla, please, when you get a chance, oh, she may have already done that. She's put the links to register both of these free webinars in the chat. Next slide. And with that, I am very pleased to introduce our first presenter, Peter Castelli. Peter is an automotive engineer and operations leader with 20 plus years of experience advancing innovation and safety across automotive, autonomous vehicle, and transportation industries. As director of PennSTART at RIDC, he leads testing, training, and research initiatives for implementing safety systems. And he previously held leadership roles scaling AV testing and operations, improving capacity, cost, and safety. Earlier, he spent a decade at Ford. Peter holds an MBA and a master's in engineering from the University of Michigan and a bachelor's in mechanical engineering from Carnegie Mellon. Over to you, Peter.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. So I'll start off and tell you a little today about the PennSTART project and the organization we're building here in Pennsylvania. I'll first say that PennSTART is an acronym, as is how we refer to the Pennsylvania Safety and Transportation Research Track. And kind of one of the first things when I joined here a little over a year ago was I questioned the word just track, because we're a lot more than just a track. And I was very kindly told by the head of Pennsylvania Turnpike that it makes the acronym work. We're going to stick with it, but it should be a lot more than a track. So hopefully we'll explain to you today a bit about what we're doing, how we're a lot more than a track, what we are doing as an organization. But I'll kick off with kind of some of our partners. So RIDC, which we'll talk about a little bit in the next slide, is leading the project. Our current funding and support to get this thing off the ground has come from the Pennsylvania Department of Transportation, PennDOT, and the Pennsylvania Turnpike, PTC. We're also working with some local universities here, Carnegie Mellon and their Safety 21 USDOT National University Transportation Center, Westmoreland County Industrial Development Corporation, which is a sister partner of ours, and then the Westmoreland County Community College. Westmoreland County is a county in southwestern Pennsylvania. It's a suburb of Pittsburgh, and it is where this facility will be located. If we go to the next slide. So a little bit about who we are and what we're doing here with RIDC. So we are an economic development corporation. We're one of the first ones in the country. We're about 70 years old. And we are a not-for-profit, but we are also a private entity. So a lot of our sister organizations that we work with are public entities, and ours is private. We started 70 years ago by a group of public and private civic duties, and their goal was to ensure economic stability in the post-industrial revolution. So a lot of our work has been taking old industrial complexes and working on how we revive those for continued economic growth in the area. PennSTART is one of those projects, and I'll get into that in a second. So we have a number of different tools we use to do that beyond just site development. We work through a number of local, state, federal grants, private grants, and then we also run our own venture capital and private equity firms and arms as well that help us invest into companies both small and starting out, and then large and more established. Can we hit the next slide? So like I said, RIDC has been around for about 70 years. There's something like 100 and some thousand jobs in the parks we've created over the years. About 25,000 of the parks we're still operating. And one of the things that stood out was starting in about 2015, CMU, Carnegie Mellon, as we call it, has been heavily in the tech industry, developing a lot of the technologies we use every day. The past 25 or 30 years, they've really kind of been the ground leading area in the areas of robotics and autonomy. And so that's, vehicles and devices that are able to operate themselves. In 2015, there was a large investment started off from private equity and venture capitals to get self-driving cars on the road and working. So what brought me back to the city. And from 2015 to 2020, there was about an $11 billion infusion of cash into Pittsburgh alone in the self-driving vehicle space. If we look at self-driving and robotics overall the past 10 years, it's been on the order of almost 17 billion, which is not an insignificant amount of money. But one of the things we want to look at is, okay, how do we leverage this and make sure that we're taking advantage of what is built and carry it going forward? So RIDC led and sponsored a report that came out. And this caught the attention of the state, who had been spending the past 5 or 6 years at the time trying to get PennStart off the ground as a site for first responders training. And one of the things the report showed was that one of the things that gets companies to stay and attracts new companies to come in is having easy access to testing, both in the public domain and in the kind of private closed off domain, right? We call it on or off highway in the US DOT term. So with that, they kind of started working together to see if we could establish a site to both serve our first responder community and to serve a lot of the technologies that the city had become noted for developing and bringing out, and hopefully grow the jobs here in southwestern PA. So if we go to the next slide, that ties us into this concept. I like to use the term proving grounds. They're more than just a test site. They're there to prove the safety, efficiency, and capability of new technologies and new processes and procedures. In the US, as we look through, there's a number of large test facilities, large proving grounds for vehicle level testing, whether it's ground vehicles or aerospace or even marine. But none of them are what we call multimodal. So some have just started recently getting updated to be able to handle a lot of the autonomous vehicle and advanced driver assist system testings. But no one had integrated it in with being able to do TIM training or any sort of TIM development and advancement. As we started to look around the world, there are some other tracks in Europe, AstraZeneca in Sweden and Immendingen in Germany, where their governments had come in and sponsored it through academic private partnerships, and also looked at integrating in beyond just product development, looking at doing first responder training and development of technologies to support that industry as well. China has completely blown us out of the water in the past 20 years. They've opened about 11 to 12 new test sites that are also fully integrated into not only doing new transportation technology development, but also training and a whole bunch of other sort of infrastructure design and capability research, which we had nothing in the US that could touch it. So part of our plan with PennStart is to help fill those gaps and start to look at how we can develop a multimodal facility, which sort of like Sweden's ASTA Zero out in Halmstad, Sweden. All right, if we go to the next slide. So this is where we've landed. So RIDC, we have a site. We already have a site. We still have it, called the Westmoreland Innovation Center. Interesting history on this site, sort of the fusion of what we're trying to do here. It was built in the late 60s by Chrysler, but never opened as an auto plant. Volkswagen bought it in the early 70s from Chrysler. They proceeded to build cars here for a little over a decade. And then they closed the plant, consolidated operations back into Mexico and Europe, and Sony took it over. And Sony proceeded to build all the TVs 27 inches and up that were glass and rear projection here from this plant for global sale all the way through about 2011. And as flat panels came on and Sony got out of the business of producing their own televisions, they turned down the production, or they stopped producing here, and the state took it over with RIDC, and we have been running it as a multi-tenant facility since that time. It's convenient. There's if you look in the upper left of that picture, there is a lot that was there for batch and hold where cars would come off the line before being shipped out. One of my earlier projects in life was to turn that into a small test site for us in the early days of AV development. It's since been growing, and we have that leased off. And we are taking the large area in the back and building the high-speed track there. We also have the community colleges, vocational school here on the site, and Westmoreland County's public safety training center is just down the road. So what is PennSTART? So PennSTART is a public-private redevelopment project. We're looking at reusing sites that exist today to bring them up and have them continue to provide economic value to the region and beyond. We are focusing on transportation testing, research, and training, all three of those areas. Our customers are emergency responders, transportation agencies, transportation industry, and research institutions. So I like to break it down that we have three high-level goals. The first one is working towards things that improve safety and efficiency of transportation systems. So this can be everything from training to new technologies to improving processes to helping conduct and support research to find out what we can do to get better. The next one is training. This touches originally, like I said, it was started off with kind of our first responder TIM training around the National Unified Goal. As we've developed this over the past 18 months, 24 months, we've actually found to grow this a little further. We're looking at supporting transportation workforce development. That's everything from road construction, roadside workers to first responders into the areas of sort of technicians that maintain both infrastructure equipment and the vehicles that run on them. And also trying to use this now as a tool where we can start to recruit more people into those areas because we are running out of supply for the demand that we need. And that ties into the last bit, which is economic development. So one is being able to train and attract people into those types of roles is important, but having these types of facilities have proven that it draws other businesses in and takes the businesses that we have here and gives them a competitive edge to help them succeed and continue to grow. So in the long term, these are really for us. And one of the reasons the state has invested in it, a way of doing economic development. The site is located about 40 minutes from Pittsburgh. Like I mentioned, we're using an existing industrial facility where we already have some of this technology in place. It also sits on the Smart Belt corridor. Any folks here from Pennsylvania, Ohio, Michigan, New Jersey, or Indiana, that is an agreement that existed initially for tolling and some other infrastructure, technology, communications, and we are now looking at growing it further to start looking at AV freight and then possibly other AV operations to kind of flow through there. As we say, we'd like to be the Texas of the North because Texas has done a really good job at being pragmatic and bringing this technology to their roads in a responsible manner. And they are able to do it given the size of the road network, the amount of freight that they have, and the sort of one single point of regulation and communication to be able to operate those systems. So let's hit the next slide. Cool. So this is kind of just a high level of our customer segments. So on one side, we have academic research institutions. So locally to us are Carnegie Mellon University and University of Pittsburgh. There's many others that we've started working with in the background, but those are the sort of leading ones given their vicinity. And then we start looking at sort of the autonomous vehicle and robotics companies that have spun out of there, some are successfully deploying. Many of them are still in the early phases, and we're helping them kind of get their feet grounded and start sending out products. Then we start moving into what we call connected vehicles, which are sort of autonomous, not autonomous vehicles, but ones that have other intermediate technologies to help kind of communicate with the infrastructure or with each other. Drones has been a big portion of what we've been looking at, although not our leading interest into the area. And then we also, spawning out of the robotics areas, there's a lot of heavy equipment manufacturers that have facilities based here in Pittsburgh to do development. I just met with one this morning, Fortune 100 company that is doing autonomous heavy equipment research that would also like to use parts of the site, not the high speed side, to develop next gen autonomous heavy equipment. And then we have our industry partners, PennDOT, PTC, and other public sector agencies, and that sort of flows into our traffic incident management and first responder capabilities. So let's hit the next slide. Cool. We like to talk about PennSTART in really two phases, which is sort of what we're working on now or planning on working on the next phase. So we're currently under construction on these first two. The first one is the Highway Safety Efficiency and Improvement Center, or some people just call it the High Speed Track, and I'll share a little more information about that later. This is really a site that's meant to and focused on vehicle testing, particularly autonomous vehicle testing, and in the case of Southwestern PA, freight. And some people have asked us why freight. We started off doing a lot of final mile delivery and ride share and things like that. The companies that are in this area have focused on freight. They're our nearest customers. Many of them already have um, facilities in RIDC properties. They're here because we've helped incentivize them to come here. And so this is an area that can help them. It's one that the state has expressed an interest in, and I think is not so much their keenest interest, but it's the one they think that has the opportunity of launching soonest in the state. So we've been focusing in on helping them get ready, but we can support beyond that. Roadway quality assurance is another one. This is a lot of many of folks outside this area probably know more about this than I do, but I've worked on the cars running on the roads for 20 some years. This is the actual building the roads and making sure that the road surfaces and so forth are up to quality standards that we need to have safe, efficient operations. Some really cool tech that's coming online with this site and beyond about making that a little less, let's say, a little more automated than what's been there today. Obviously, TIM advancement. I'll talk about one project we just got a fund for that we're starting to kick off on sort of advancing the way that TIM is done today in some areas where we can combine some of these different stakeholders to make forward improvement. And then this one, which just got updated at the beginning of this year, is tolling and enforcement technology. So today, the Turnpike in Pennsylvania, along with E-ZPass and OmniAir, have worked on a lot of different kind of tolling technologies. Many people here are probably aware of them. And they've started, at least in Pennsylvania, we're now allowed to start looking at enforcement technologies. So that's what we're doing. And we'll know more about that. So the site will have gantries coming online when we open, and there'll be a number of different, they call them plug fests, where different suppliers will come in. We'll be able to test technologies, find issues, and work through them. So that's the high speed side of the business. The training center is obviously the next big one. But like I said, the site was originally created with the focus around TIM training and providing a site where we can provide classroom experiences and then go out and actually do scenarios in a closed, safe environment before having to go on public road and see these things firsthand. Railway is usually part of TIM, but we've broken it out separately here, given some funding strategies around FEMA and what this site can offer. There is a whole host of driver training that's being kind of queued up and planned here. Everything from first responder training and vehicle driver training to snowplow, heavy equipment operators, into some of our more at-risk driver population, and doing just general consumer level training, personal vehicle training. And then, as I mentioned before, transportation vocation. So one of the things that stood out to us in the past about 9 months is we've sort of gone through a couple of different plans on what this should be and brought in different groups to help us summarize and help us with a master plan. Is not only do we have to provide training to those that exist to want to get into the field, we have a shortcoming of people entering the field versus the demand. So how can we make this an exciting place that would attract people to want to come into the transportation vocations, and particularly the first responder vocations? And that ties into one of the key projects we're working on in phase 2. We're planning out now and working on establishing the funding plans for, and that is what we call the simulation center, transportation simulation center. In the world of simulation, if anyone's ever kind of delved into this at all, there's sort of two parts to it. The first one is what we call full virtual sim or digital twin or physical AI, I think is the new buzzword we're using. But this is where essentially we simulate the real world completely in the digital realm on a computer. So very much like a video game, but with higher fidelity and different goals and purposes. And so we can use virtual simulation to test new software that would go on vehicles, new software that would go into the infrastructure, new software that would be embedded in hardware with TIM first responders, and see how it responds to a digital environment that represents the real world. So we make highly realistic models of the real world and then test them in a fully digital environment. And then as this or whatever was under development there starts to look like it's working, then we start moving into this augmented reality or simulators world. So you can see a picture here, which is a car with its kind of the body of a car. It doesn't have the suspension or powertrain in it, and it's sitting on a platform of hydraulics. So we can move that car all around and make it feel like there's people sitting in that car, and that car will feel like it's doing whatever they're commanding it to do on the road. There are screens and speakers around them, so you get a 360-degree environment that's very high fidelity, looks very real, but we don't actually have to put the person out into the real world driving on the roads. We're weather agnostic with these. We can actually have faster turnaround times. Simulators have proven in our automotive and autonomous vehicle development to be very valuable, but they're in their infancy. So there's a lot of work here figuring out how we tie them into the engineering chain for vehicles that we're putting out and making sure we develop them for safety. But we've also started to see in their infancy using these as way of training first responders. So I'm sure many of you probably done some early work on some of the first generation of simulators for firefighter training, police training, snowplow training. I just went through a snowplow training with the Turnpike. The results have been stunning, and how you can train people faster, you get a higher quality output out of the system. And especially in the snowplow business, you can start before the snow has fallen, get people's skills back up to speed, and not take the risk when they finally go out in a real snowstorm and start pushing snow. So these have proven to be very valuable in both areas. Plus, they're also just kind of cool, interesting things to go if you've ever been in one. They're pretty exciting and they draw people into it, and it's something they enjoy going and doing, which is a key part. The last bit we're working on, and this is kind of further out, we already have some urban transportation development on the site with a couple of private partners, but there's a lot of next generation stuff that we've started looking at with some universities and some private partners. Real quick, Edge Compute Connected Infrastructure is a new project that Sweden, as I mentioned, Australia has started doing, and the US has expressed interest in, which is where rather than embedding the sensors and compute onto an autonomous vehicle, you actually put it into the infrastructure. And then the infrastructure, which is the roadways, tells the cars where to go drive and what to do. Interesting concepts with it. Needs some more work to see if it's viable or if there are things we can learn from it. AV Final Mile Robotaxi. This is already well underway, but it will grow exponentially in the next 20 years. And then what we call yard management, which is all the vehicles that run around a factory like we have here. We already have some customers working in that freight side that have asked for the ability to also test within the yard management. So they would drop off a trailer filled full of goods. It would get moved around the warehouses or the manufacturing facilities and then put back onto trucks to go on public roads. So let's hit the next slide if we could. Cool. So I wanted with this group to spend a little more time, what were we doing in the training center, and start to focus in on it. So I'll go down some of the bullet points here. We just recently finished up, actually with the University of Michigan, of all things, master plan. So they spent about 6 months doing a number of interviews and deep dives on some of the economics and policies and funding sources and users, and trying to come up with what would be a solid business plan for the training center. So more on that coming, but these are some of the high level points that have come out of it. And the first one is we really want this to eventually become a national destination. To start off with, we're going to focus on being a kind of a Western PA, then a PA, then a regional, Eastern Ohio, West Virginia, Maryland type of site, and hopefully grow beyond that. We are renovating what used to be kind of, they called it the founder's room or the main hall of the old Sony plant. It's about 5,000 square feet. It holds 200 people. That renovation has already been kicked off to be a primary area to host events and trainings. There are a number of classrooms and conference rooms around it that are being updated now to get ready for it. I talked to you a little bit about augmented reality and simulators above. We have landed a grant, which I'll talk about lower, to help kind of kick that off and what that looks like. And our requirements with the state, who brought the funding to the table and helped us get this moving forward, 15% of the track's time must be used for TIM training and advancement every year, at minimum. So it can be higher than that, but a minimum of 15% of this track site will be used for TIM training and advancement. They've asked us initially to launch with about 1,500 trainees per year, and we'll show on the next slide kind of what we're thinking about how that looks, growing that out to about 5,000 trainees per year to get this experience. We are currently in the phase where it's currently kicking off. It hasn't completely rolled out of looking for different sponsorship opportunities. So everything from sort of naming rights from big companies that would like to take this on and have their name on it, to users where we're looking at, you make a yearly commitment, you get early access and some benefits to that. And then one of the other big things here, especially in the first responders, is in-kind donations and integrating your equipment into the trainings that we're offering. But one of the ones I really wanted to focus on in here is we do some current training. It's run through our community college and their public safety training center. We have some space that they don't currently have, and then we will have a lot more going forward. We'll talk about that. But we did recently land a Safe Streets for All grant. It's a bit different than what these things typically are. We got the full amount we asked for. We worked on it with Westmoreland County as the recipient. Our IDC is sort of leading, in particular, PennSTART is sort of leading on what it's going to be. But overall, we called it Safe to Serve. The goal is to modernize traffic incident management training for responder protection. And there's a couple pieces to it. So the first one is developing and demonstrating I mean, we got lots of usage of the word AI here. It will have what's known as AI, but I think it's an overly broad term given my history using it. But it'll be develop and demonstrate an AI traffic incident management system that allows us to do cross-agency reporting, and the goal of improving protecting first responders, preventing secondary crashes, and reducing the incident-related fatalities that come out of those. So in particular, there is a piece of developing this new tech, essentially using a lot of our first responder base here in Westmoreland County is sort of it'll be done offline and in simulators, which is where some of that budget comes from, but is using them to help kind of train the models to be highly effective and then test the efficacy of it in the real world. The first plan on this is actually probably a edge compute based dash cam that can complete windshield assessments. So rather than having to go on a radio and report out your windshield assessment, when you pull up, it'll be able to do it using cameras, and then pass that on to all the other first responder agencies coming in. So that's a project between ourselves, the Turnpike, Westmoreland County, and Carnegie Mellon and the Safety 21 UTC, and along with a couple private companies that have been wanting to help kind of develop a technology like this. Next slide. Sorry, I'm over here clicking on my mouse looking for the next one. So this is an idea. This is high level of some of the events that we're going to be offering at the site, hopefully starting in 2027. National First Responder Training Summits. You can kind of read these. They're regional first responder cross training events. These are 2-day events. One of the big things that stood out is we really need to make sure we offer a lot of cross-functional trainings, rather than just having sort of fire teams train with themselves, EMS train with themselves, wreckers train separately. Pulling them all together and having these kind of 2-day trainings where they're all integrated would be super valuable. A lot of feedback from the towing wrecking community that they just don't have enough opportunity for training. They have the money, they have the drive. They're looking for a space and some really good integrated modules to do that. And then some local tailored first response training that will run out of our local community college areas. Let's go to the next slide. So this is an overview of the site. We've added some extra roads in here in the middle that won't always be there. But that was to show the Department of Environmental Protection what the non-impervious pavement services maximum could be. But we're building the high-speed outer loop now. We're finalizing the funding to add a third lane and sort of a divided highway section into it. And we're finalizing the funding to build the UDA, but we've started construction on the whole site now, and we will definitely finish the 2-lane outer section. This is a 2-mile loop. Max speeds in a Class 8 fully loaded truck, which would probably be similar to a fire truck, are about 71 miles an hour down the straights for a 30-second on target time, and then 45 miles an hour through the corners. Let's hit the next one, please. Cool. So yeah, construction began 4 or 5 months ago now. We hope to complete late summer, the earthwork moving. We've got to move about 1 million cubic yards of dirt. You can see the equipment getting staged there. There's now about 5 times more than that running out there. We are finishing up the designs on tunnels, garages, gantries, and electrical design. That's the last things we need to put in. Paving will begin late summer of this year. We hope to be open by fall of 2026. I think right now it's October 30th is the date that's being carried, but we do expect that to probably slip with some of the snow unless we have a really good dry summer. So we'll see where we land. And like I mentioned, phase 2, the simulation centers and so forth are already being planned, and we're working on funding and bringing those online, hoping to open them in 2028. Where are we overall? We are signing up for the current TIM training that we coordinate through the local community college. Track user sign up will open in Q3. Sponsorship packages are due out hopefully beginning of Q2. And then we do have on-site garage and offices that are available for rent or lease. A couple of our private partners have already picked some of those up, but there's still ones available, and we're quickly able to build more. So let's hit the next slide. Awesome. All right, this is the end. Thank you. If you guys want more information, please hit pennstart.org. There's a contact us form. It goes to myself and a couple of people here in the office who've managed this project for a few years. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out to get a hold of us. And with that, I'll turn it back over to the next person, Brian.
All right. Thanks so much, Peter. I had a little bit of trouble getting back on video and audio, but if you have questions for Peter, please do add them to the chat and we'll get to, add them to the Q&A and we'll get to them at the end of the second presentation. Our next presenter is Brian Purvis. Brian works with AECOM Technical Services, where he's a national leader and subject matter expert in traffic incident management, safety service patrol operations and response, and innovative solutions to traffic operations. With over 2 decades of traffic operations experience, Brian's career spans across roadway design, signal and ITS operations, TMC operations, safety service patrol program management, along with response to natural and man-made disasters. Brian is also a member of FHWA's TIM self-assessment consultant support team. He is going to speak to the TIM self-assessment, but before we get started on that, we have a quick polling question for our audience. So Kyla, if you could bring that up. Great. And the question is, have you ever participated in the TIM self-assessment? Please take a moment to answer yes, no, or not sure. We'll give you guys a few seconds, and then hopefully I can't see just how many people have voted, so I'm going to give it 10 more seconds, and then Kyla, if you could share the response live. All right. And the outcome, about half have participated in the TIM self-assessment, and half have not or aren't quite sure whether they did or not. So this is actually a great mix because I think for those that have participated, it'll be great to see how your participation compares with others who complete TIM self-assessments. And for those that haven't, this is a really great opportunity to understand about a tool that will help your TIM program figure out what's working well and where you can focus on as you pivot next. So with that, over to you, Brian.
I appreciate it. And I love looking at these 10-year-old pictures where I think the only thing that's the same is my dimples. It looks like a Woolly Willy thing with the facial stuff. But next slide. But yes, I'm Brian Purvis with AECOM. So I've been doing traffic incident management for a couple of decades now. And when they started this traffic incident management self-assessment, yeah, it was kind of a big deal because we had no benchmark prior to this. So what I want to talk about today is just some results. So we did get everything finalized with the TIM self-assessment this year for 2025. We'll just talk about some of the overview of what we found out, and then I wanted to talk to you. So I'm actually on the board of the Georgia Time Task Force. It used to be the Metro Atlanta, but now we're statewide. But we still do a yearly assessment specifically for Metro Atlanta. And I kind of wanted to show you how we actually use the assessment, and maybe that'll help with the 20 out of 41 of you that have actually used it, and maybe give you some guidance on the others that haven't going forward. So next slide. So just some high level results. This assessment has been around since 2015. The questions were revised prior to the 2020 assessment cycle. We had the same assessment last year for 2025 as we did the previous 2 years. Same 41 questions. 9 of those were not applicable for the rural or emerging TIM programs, which we had 8 of those this year. Next slide. So going through and looking at these, we kind of break it out into different groups. The top 75 metropolitan areas, and we base that solely on population, not how established your TIM teams are or anything like that. But the rural and emerging ones are basically the ones that are outside of those top 75, and they have TIM programs that may have been recently added or created, and the groups that considered themselves rural or emerging self-identified by not taking all 41 questions, only basically just the 32. And they have some abbreviated groupings on there. Like I said, eight groups consider themselves rural emerging. Absolutely nothing wrong with that. From 24 to 25, we actually had a couple that moved from rural and emerging to the metro full-blown 41 questions, which was good to see. So next slide. So just some of the results of who actually completed this. It was designed initially to be done by a TIM team, a full committee to score each question individually. I will tell you over the last decade that has kind of changed a little bit. 31% of the folks that entered these last year, and about half of them the previous submittal, were done by a single agency or individual, which was absolutely fine. Typically, you've got a TIM champion in each one of these TIM teams that kind of coordinates and facilitates, or you may have somebody like me in one of their TIM teams that's more vocal, and it is willing to take these types of assessments on and speak on behalf of the group. Those are absolutely fine. But these are the regular players, law enforcement, fire, towing, EMS, 911 centers, DOTs especially. Then you'll have some other ancillary groups like hazmat, media, and other groups, contractors, construction groups, things like that. Next slide. But typically, we're seeing transportation really take the lead on these programs. It is a federal highways initiative. So obviously, the ones that are filling these out are typically DOT personnel or federal highways representatives. But what I do like about this spread is you're seeing a big participation on the about 70% that are having these done with teams. 67% from law enforcement, well over half of fire community participating in this. Towing and recovery, almost 40%. And then bringing in your PSAPs, your public safety, your dispatch groups, over a third of them. Those are really good numbers. So it looks like it's more of a holistic approach when a team is putting these assessments together. So next slide. So just to kind of give you a map of where these occurred, we had a pretty good sampling of the country. A lot on the East Coast, a lot in the Central. The West Coast, we had a lot of folks in the California region, Las Vegas, Nevada, Phoenix. A big group in Texas, huge groups in Florida, Colorado, North Carolina. Even a couple in Tennessee that came on this year. So, just great participation. Virginia had a lot of assessments this year, Nebraska. So it was really good to see this dispersed group. Even Puerto Rico entered one and become strong in updating us on their assessments. Next slide. So as far as where we're at, a lot of this information is in our final report that we submitted to Federal Highways. They have a big vetting process, but I'll tell you, if you submitted, you should be able to go in and actually pull the full report. It's only about 5 pages, and a lot of this is cut and pasted right out of it. You should be able to pull that up online and download it. It's under the file section. If you go back into where you actually submitted the assessment. But we did have 85 TIM programs, individual programs submit for 2025. That included 28 states and Puerto Rico that were a part of this. Roughly 74% average score out of 100. So if you go all the way back to 2015, that was a 15% increase over the baseline. And that's just kind of a splattering of where we were at. Top 40 metro area scored a little over 76. The top 75 even higher. There were some areas down in Florida that had some really, really high scores. And then the non-metro areas scored a 70, which is still really good. It shows a lot of advancement with those programs. Next slide. So this is just our trends from our baseline. When we first rolled this out, the total score, not counting the rural and emerging, was 64%. We had a dip in 2023, 24. There was a delay in doing it in 2023, so it kind of stretched us out. We had some groups that didn't put in that were really high scoring in 2023. We had a lot more rural and emerging programs and newer programs that had participated for the first time, which had a little bit lower scores. But last year, it looked more like in 2022. And if you look at the trend, it's a pretty steady trend from 2015 up until 2025. So, I was happy to see us kind of rebound last year back to where you would have probably expected us to get. And a lot of the programs that do this survey have done it year after year after year, and they're starting to stabilize a little bit. So I'll talk about that with the Georgia perspective in a minute. Next slide. So here's some of the actual results. This is the overall. Again, 73.6% total. Some of the high scores out of Florida, Georgia, somewhere around 97 out of 100. So they're kind of peaking out. So one of the things we may need to look at going forward is maybe revising our questions and setting a new baseline next year. Strategic section, 42 highest scores somewhere around 42 out of 45. About 32% was the average. Tactical, you could have got a 45 at the top. We were about 35 as the average. The support, which is only 3 questions, somewhere around 7 out of 10. So even pretty good on the support section. We'll go into those a little bit closer. So next slide. But all of those were positive growth. So if you look from the national average, we went up about 4.1% from the year before. That is a big jump. The strategic section, which is a lot of things about, how often do you have TIM teams? Are they formalized and things like that? That was the biggest. The tactical is more about your laws. What laws do you have, like move over, quick clearance laws and stuff? Not as big on that of a jump as would be expected because most of those things take, change of general statutes and things like that. A lot harder to move the needle on those. The support section was a really good jump up also. That's things like after action reviews, detour plans, signal timings and stuff like that. Next slide. So again, just real quick, I'm going to jump through. These are the strategic sections. So again, all positive growth on these. Strategic as a total, we were about 32 out of a possible 45. The formal TIM programs, most everybody has some kind of a program that's putting in these assessments. TIM training after action review, not as many are doing those. Performance measures, a little bit less of a percentage on that. But most of the group, this is where the strength is. And if you don't have these are things you can do internally and set up without, having to go to legislators and those types of things. Next slide. So these are some of the higher performers, Metro Atlanta, a lot of the groups in Florida, have successful TIM programs. They meet regularly. One of the big takeaways from looking at the reports is how often are these folks meeting? If you meet at least 4 times a year, your numbers are substantially higher. Those that only meet on maybe once a year on an as needed basis for a after action review tend to fare a little worse from a scoring standpoint. Down to about 48.2% versus 71.8 if you meet multiple times. Next slide. On the tactical section, a little bit different. Next slide. So Tim Laws, we score pretty high, 6.4. Oh, you can go back. Well, that's fine. You leave it there. So not quite as high, but we're scoring 11% increase over the baseline, minimal increase from the year before. But again, California, Florida, Atlanta, a lot of these groups are high performers, even in the tactical sections. They've got your quick clearance laws, move over laws, have a lot of these things already in place. Next slide. Last section that we've got on here. It's only 3 questions, but it's the support section. Some of the groups scored 10 out of 10. Some of them are only got one of those questions. So it's a lot smaller sampling. Next slide. So just kind of looking at this really quickly. Again, some of the things that we were looking at, the high scoring was question 41, which is asking about pre-planned detour routes or alternate routes identified and shared between stakeholders. Lowest question on there, do we have things in place, policies and procedures for signal timing for arterials for traffic incident management response? So those are things that are basically setting up meetings and trying to coordinate with other departments. So these should be things that we can easily increase because we don't have to go outside of our agencies to put these types of things in place. Next slide. So just some high-level findings on the rural. So there were only 8 groups or 8 TIM teams in 3 states. They were in Colorado, Florida, and Texas that self-submitted. We started these back in 2021. Next slide. So we'll jump through this real quick. So again, they only had 32 questions. High score 86.4, which is really good. That's a 24% increase over the baseline, which was in 2021. So a lot of growth in those. Some of these are a lot newer programs. And like I said, some of them that were back in the early 2020s are now in the urban areas. So a lot of growth from the rural and emerging. So next slide. So again, this is just a quick list, not calling out in any order, but Florida, Texas, Virginia, North Central Texas, Metro Atlanta, Milwaukee. I think I heard that was Minnesota. Some of these, the WSDOT time program, New York, Memphis, Tennessee. I'm seeing a lot of groups on here, Ohio, Massachusetts, Knoxville, Tennessee, a lot of groups in Florida. We've got a lot of different groups. So if you want to reach out on a particular section that you need help on, we can cross-pollinate with the database that we've got and find a group that is excelling in that and maybe has the similar population, similar regional aspects, and kind of put you in touch with who filled out the assessment. It's kind of the cheap and easy way to do the peer exchange by just kind of putting 2 people together to kind of talk about their programs and best practices. So just keep that in mind. Happy to pull that information at any time. Next slide. So real quick, these are the links to the assessment. We'll drop those over in the chat in just a second. But if you do want any of that information and cross-referencing, feel free to email that bottom link, the FHWA-TIM-self-assessment at battelle.org. That'll go to myself, the Battelle team, and Sharon Cuevas at FHWA. And we'll be glad to look into whatever the questions are and investigate for you. Next slide. So one of the things I want to talk about quickly is, and these are your TIM contracts from FHWA. I'm kind of speaking on their behalf today, but there's Sharon Cuevas, our illustrious Jim Ostrich, who couldn't be with us today, and David Johnson. But really quickly, in the next couple of minutes, I just want to give you a couple examples that we did in Metro Atlanta. So next slide. So from the Metro Atlanta, we've got a time task force. It's got two co-chairs, the head of the HERO program and a captain with Georgia State Patrol. We've got 8 government chairs, 7 agency chairs, and 5 committee chairs. And then there's a support contractor that helps us drive the ship and keep everything on task. Next slide. So this is a very established board. We have, other than the government chairs, it's those are full-time positions. Ours are 2-year commitments. But we did a Metro Atlanta assessment this past year. We just did it on a Teams call. So we had all these different agencies represented. One of the shortcuts that we did is if we scored a 4 out of 4 on these, if we were already at the pinnacle, we didn't waste any time talking about those. We just went through. I actually went through and pre-filled out the assessment with what we had from last year. Just pulled those scores over, and we focused our attention and discussion on the things that came in at 3 or below. So next slide. So just kind of making the most out of our time together. Next slide. There you go. After we completed it and submitted it and everything came back, we basically set up another meeting. And as part of our yearly work, the board, you can go back one, the board sets the agenda, and we kind of go through and put together our goals and advancements on what we want to put together at our next meeting after we do the assessment. So we look at what we didn't score a 4 on, and we start talking about what can we do to implement, what initiatives can we implement? Are there any low-hanging fruits that we can knock out quick? But we want to put in things that we can complete and also measure. So it's not just about doing initiatives, but can we measure the outcomes? So next slide. So just 3 quick examples, and then I'll turn it back over. One of these was the next one. TIM training. So this is one that we kind of beat ourselves up on, even though we're really well at training. We've trained the trainers with a ton of people, but it's just a small clump of us in Georgia that are doing the training. We've seen some initiatives from like Indiana that's knocking it out of the park. So we're kind of looking at some of the things that are being done by other states. Next slide. So we actually put 2 of our committees together, our operations, and we have a dedicated training committee. So we started talking about things that we could do to get responders trained, some outreach we could do to folks that we think are training but aren't updating their records. And then we looked at things like mandating training at a statewide. Last year, our goal was let's make it law. And then we pretty much realized that that was not an achievable goal. So now we're actually backing up and starting back over with some of the individual agencies and either working at their academy level or in their in-service training. So next slide. So 2 other quick updates or examples of what we're doing here. Next slide. There you go. Secondary crashes. This is one that's tough for all of us. Federal definition. But this is something that we're not routinely doing, only on a case-by-case during an after-action review. So next slide. So we're doing a 2-pronged approach on this as an initiative. We're looking at it's in the Georgia crash reports, but it's not currently being utilized. It's not being trained. So we're working with Governor's Office of Highway Safety and Department of Public Safety to actually try to get that as part of the training, and then get it on the recorded crash reports. We're also looking at some technology with the RIDIS software and the state crash database to cross-reference and figure out if we can come up with a technology to either break it down by region or corridor or interstate and try to or section a roadway to validate initiatives that we're doing to make sure we're having a positive impact on secondary crashes. Next slide. And then the last initiative that we looked at was more along the lines of fatal crash clearance. So we still have some issues where we're waiting for coroners and medical examiners. You can hit the next slide. So some of the initiatives we looked at was one of the folks, and he's actually the chair of our training committee, as was just elected as the county coroner, and now goes to all the medical examiners and coroners meetings statewide. So we've got an in. So when you find out that you've got an in one of these, they don't last long, so take advantage of them and definitely see if you can get in front of those folks and start providing training and outreach and find out what they need. So next slide. So those are just some of the cases that we've been using. So definitely try to continue utilizing the TIM self-assessment to benchmark and advance your programs. That is still open right now. We love to see best practices when you fill out what you're actually doing in there, and report on how you got that progress done. It really helps us cross-pollinate and utilize that to kind of set goals from the national perspective. But more importantly, it's the goal of it is to help you track your progress and prioritize your initiatives. So with that, there's my contact information if there's anything I can share, and I will turn it back over to Vaishali. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you so much, Brian. Stay on because we have two quick poll questions that we want to ask you. So Kyla, if you could bring the first one up. So now that you guys have learned a lot more about the TIM self-assessment, for those that have completed the self-assessment, would love for you to fill out this poll question and how valuable or useful do you find the TIM self-assessment for directing your TIM program's focus, kind of like what Brian did with their Georgia Time Task Force? All right.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, go ahead, Brian.
No, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah. So I think this is a pretty good response. Most of them find it very valuable or somewhat valuable, which is hopefully the direction we were hoping for, and hopefully something that more TIM programs will do. One of the things to note is, go ahead and you can end that poll, Kyla. We have one last poll to do after this. But one of the things to note is, the self-assessment has been around for over 20 plus years. It's been refreshed a couple of times, but one of the new things that Brian and the team there have done is make it available year round. So you don't have to wait. If your program is at a point where they're having these strategic discussions, you can go to the self-assessment website, register in there. It's free, and you can use the questions to help you figure out where you are and where you may want to head. And I think that's a really, really valuable sort of pivot point to the self-assessment. We have one final question for the self-assessment, Kyla, and that is, what frequency do you feel would be most effective for your TIM program in doing the self-assessment? And so welcome you to provide your thoughts on that as well. Thank you so much. We'll give it a few minutes and a few seconds, sorry. And then we'll go ahead and move to the Q&A for this webinar. And I think we just answered the first question, which Pradeep offered, which is the TIM self-assessment available year-round, or is it provided during a window of time each year? So Brian, I don't know if you want to provide any additional clarity on what I shared.
Yeah, it's the website is it runs continuous right now. So yeah, feel free to use it at any time. We typically take the scores, like if you entered something right now and we do a 2026 assessment, we will go ahead and accept it today. But you can update it anytime you want. You can, use it for multiple purposes. But yeah, it is available year round. We do the formal capture usually from September to November. So we would do another one of these webinars and actually instruct you on when we're starting and stopping. But yeah, feel free to use it anytime you want to.
Thank you. Appreciate it. So now we move to the Q&A portion of our webinar, and we do have a couple of questions. So let me go ahead and get started with a question for Peter. Do you believe, I mean, this is a pretty incredible environment that you talked about with the Penn Start, and a lot of innovation in that bubble. How do you believe this new facility would attract more responders to get Tim trained? I mean, that is the hope, right?
Yeah. I guess there's two avenues it's going to attract them. The first one is in sort of like the Kevin Costner Field of Dreams, it's if you build it, they will come, which is given the location. And Pennsylvania on the numbers you're showing is up there, but we still have a lot of room to do. And so we're hoping that given the effort and time we put into this facility and the support we've gotten from a number of different players, that this will be a way to kind of incentivize people to get up and get that training and continue it and kind of further it, especially locally within a couple hours drive. And we've got a lot of programs we're working on in the background to hopefully make that more feasible for folks. But I think bigger and longer term is the more we can do to broaden what we can train and show the efficacy of it and make it exciting, for lack of a better term. Not that some of it isn't, but I think we've all been through enough trainings that are sort of like, I'm glad I had it, but it's not really something I'd prefer to have been doing, and make it something that's really exciting and can attract them in, attract people to do it. We hopefully can grow it from there. So, I don't want to go into too many of the details, but a lot of the feedback, a lot of the analysis we've been able to do, research we've been able to do, there are some sites that do a pretty good job at it in other areas of kind of first responder training. And we're hoping that this can become one of those sites that is able to offer that sort of unique, a person here in the office refers to it as the Disney World experience. And so that might be a little bit of an exaggeration. I hope it's a little bit of an exaggeration, but that's sort of what we're trying to do with it.
Well, yeah, I think when you were talking about all of the features of the new environment, actually having the physical equipment out there that you can sort of be in the real world, but then also having some of the VR, virtual reality, and other tools, I could see that as a little Disneyland type experience for sure. The National Tim Responder Training has always been offered for free, but we expect that there would be some cost, whether it be the travel, or do you expect there to be a cost for attending the training at the Penn Start environment?
So I don't have the final answers for all that. I think, we're working on right now is understanding what the costs are to operate it at the kind of levels we're talking about. We're also understanding what the possible revenue streams are, whether that's, paying as a service to come to it, but there's also a number of different grants and groups that help fund it and sponsor it. So how that's landed, we're not quite sure, right? I know there's been, we've looked through these, as I mentioned before, done our research, look at different sites that run these. Some are very expensive fees to go to, and other ones are sort of completely for free. There's a range in between when we look through the entire outside the TIM spectrum, but all the training that has to go through. And where we land really kind of depends on how well we are supported in sort of the covering the operating costs. We're trying to keep those as low as we can. We are a nonprofit. We're not out here to try to run this as a business that we can't lose money on it, but we don't want to make money on it. So that will still be determined. And then it also, I guess the other factor in there is depending on who is getting that training, where they're from, what their areas are, there are different funding sources that are available that we're hoping to be able to work with that kind of will cover those costs. So maybe if you're from a certain background in a certain location, it costs a certain amount because you get a subsidy. Other ones are paying a full price and other ones are fully subsidized. So it's hard to kind of gauge where that's all going to land. That's sort of the phase we're working on right now, is figuring that out, but really figuring out who can sort of be the expert that for Penn Start to sort of work with the first responders to help lay that out. Because we found the sites that are successful are the sites that have those sort of, I don't want to say travel coordinators, but it's almost what it is sort of like for everybody to come in and sort of help you find the package and get it planned.
Very, very, very good points. Beyond the training, there's a lot more to that Penn Start site. Do you have some initial thoughts on how the facility can contribute to improving the overall practice of TIM, or certain aspects of traffic incident management from detection to situational awareness, response, quick clearance, all of those sort of life cycle for Tim.
Yeah, we could probably go on for a week about all the different things that are sitting on our plate here on areas we could go into and things we could look at. I think the Safe Streets for All grant is sort of a good first um, example of sort of the type of things we're looking at where we could go after that, right? Sort of identifying key pain points and sort of saying it from a bringing in different players that maybe don't play work in it every day, but have different technology and experience backgrounds and say, okay, what are different ways we can approach this? That's one. We've done a number of my other monitor here. There's a number of different proposals going on right now with like the US DOT and areas they see that they'd like us to bring in research and who can start to kind of develop that. And part of that ties to tied into, as everyone here knows, we can start looking at different ways of how we provide funding to those type of things to keep them going, right? Whether it's public or private. And that sometimes drives what it is. So the more noise we can make on one area is sort of where we're going, or the more noise people make is sort of where we're going with it. So yeah, the site is really designed to be flexible. As I've come in and sort of taken over the site design, my experience in the 20 some years of doing testing and these things is you never know what's going to happen tomorrow. So you just kind of design the site to be highly adaptable and flexible to whatever we need. So where we are right now is getting the flexible footprint in there. And then we kind of use the analogy. It's sort of like some of the industrial development sites we do. We build a big box cold shell first of different sizes, and then we figure out updating the inside for whoever needs it for whatever purpose. The track is kind of sort of being, the whole site is sort of being built with that flexibility in mind. We're taking the same approach with simulation. A lot of the tools now are sort of specialized to, hey, this only does this one little chunk here, that one little chunk there, and you're going, well, the core hardware and software behind it are really all the same. How do we like get your tool to be more flexible or grow that? So we have that kind of capability to cover a wide spectrum of different users. So sorry, not a direct answer, but sort of the where we are state of things today.
Get that. I get that. Do you have anything specific in this SMART grant that is Tim relevant that you want to speak to?
Yeah, we've still got to kind of lock down. We have a narrative, but who's doing what? But yeah, the whole thing is really focused on Tim, right? That was sort of one of the areas given Penn Start and where we are in Westmoreland County, that's one of the big things we did. Typically when you look at the Safe Streets for All grants, they typically tend to be more around smart infrastructure type of ideas or improving a dangerous intersection. And we took a totally different angle at it, given our just who we are and what we're doing. And so, yeah, the idea with this is to, kind of kickstart, but also show a first beta prototype of what we can do with that. And so I think someone posted up here like Dashcam AI, that is part of it. We might go and start developing that and realize it's not super effective. We don't suspect that's the case, but this is a playground where we can start to test bed, if you will, sandbox as we call it, where we can start to try those things out and see, do they work? And if they do, then just kind of build the leverage to go further from there and get them built out and deployed.
Thank you. Very interesting. Looking forward to seeing what comes to fruition in the next 1 to 3 years from training to additional research. So,
yeah, absolutely.
Brian, a question for you. You shared how the Tim self-assessment helped Georgia Time focus their efforts. You didn't worry about the 4s and you focused on the 1s and 2s or maybe even the 3s. Do you also use it to show progress from year to year or demonstrate value to those within and outside the TIM program, whether it's an executive or to bring more responders to the table?
Yes, and it's part of our bigger initiative on a yearly basis. So we've got the statewide committee, but it's basically overseeing and setting agendas for all the local TIM teams. We've got TIM teams splattered all over the state of Georgia. So it really helps us to kind of identify, trends and where we need to go. A lot of what Peter's talking about with the technology is coming so fast and the innovations in the transportation industry, that all goes to the end user, which is actually not just the driver, but it's the responders that have to deal with these things. So yes, it does help drive the ship, and we do share results. We share our training, where we're at as a state. Um, we share results of assessments and things like that with the larger TIM community across the entire state.
Do you see a benefit from having the smaller TIM programs conduct the self-assessment or the rural TIM self-assessment?
I do, because in a lot of cases they've got the highest opportunity for growth. Um, when things happen in the smaller areas, they don't have as many resources. They've got to be more efficient than the big guys. We bring all the toys, we bring all the training and all the staff and all the funding. A lot of your smaller TIM programs really struggle to keep up with all these changes in the industry. And like I said, what's a small impact in Metro Atlanta, you come out to, Macon, Georgia, or Tifton, or an area like that, a small disruption is massive to them. So yes, I think that is the biggest opportunity for us, is in the newer programs and the emerging programs.
Well, I don't have any more questions, but I'm going to do a last call with the audience. If you have any questions for Peter or Brian, feel free to add them to the Q&A or the chat, because now we're relatively clear. And if you have any general TIM national or other program area questions, feel free to add them. We have about 2 to 3 minutes. We typically try to conclude the webinar about 10 to 15 minutes advance of the 3 o'clock mark and give you a little time back. But if there's any questions, we'll give you guys about 30 seconds to voice them. And if not, then we will meet on the same venue, the same time next month at 1:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And Kyla, thank you for sharing a lot of the TIM resources. I did want to note that the FHWA TIM news publication is on pause temporarily. So whereas we used to send, information on upcoming webinars through FHWA TIM News, it's now generally coming through the NOCO newsletter. So if you have not subscribed to NOCO, that would be a great time now would be a good time to do so. The NHI TIM training course is live, as well as the Responder Safety Learning Network's TIM certificate, which allows you to take 10 different lesson modules. And when you complete that, it's equivalent to the National TIM Responder Training. And of course, are the links to the help desk, the self-assessment tool, and the spot where you can find all 7+ years of Talking TIM webinar recordings on the NOCO site under Talking TIM. And with that, I want to say thank you to our wonderful presenters, Peter and Brian, and to Kyla. We missed Jim Ostrich today, but I think you guys did an exceptional job sharing great information on the state of practice in traffic incident management and innovation in TIM as well. So thank you guys very much. That is all, and have a safe and hopefully less freezing time for those on the East Coast. And congratulations for those who are waiting for snow out in the Colorado and other areas. Now you've got it. So have a great one. Goodbye.